The massive white hospital ship floated peacefully in the dark emptiness of space. Its hull was covered with huge red cross symbols that could be seen from very far away. This was the UES Florence Nightingale, Earth's most advanced medical vessel, and it had come to help people caught in a terrible war. Captain Jihoon Park stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars through the large viewing window. His face showed worry as he watched another small refugee ship slowly approach their position. These ships kept coming one after another, filled with injured people who needed help desperately. "Captain, we have another emergency call coming." "In," said Lieutenant Mina Kim from her station. She was monitoring all the communication channels and her headset crackled with urgent messages. "It's the Altarian transport ship. They say they have 37 wounded people on board, and some of them are just children." Jihoon closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. The war between the powerful Vorthak Empire and the smaller coalition worlds had been going on for months now. Innocent families were trapped between the fighting armies, and many were getting hurt or killed. That's why Earth had sent the Florence Nightingale here 3 days ago. They came not to fight, but to heal anyone who needed medical care. "Tell them to come alongside us," Jihoon ordered. "Dr. Sujin Lee is waiting in Medical Bay 3. She'll take care of the worst cases first." The refugee ship was old and damaged. Scorch marks covered its hull where enemy weapons had hit it. As it slowly moved closer to dock with the hospital ship, Jihoon could see faces pressed against the small windows. Some were humans, others were blue-skinned Altarians, and a few belonged to species he didn't recognize. All of them looked scared and hurt. Dr. Sujin Lee was already waiting at the docking bay with her medical team. She was a small woman, but everyone respected her because she was the best doctor in the Earth fleet. She never got tired, never complained, and never refused to help someone who was injured, no matter which side of the war they came from. "Bring the stretchers quickly," she called to nurses Hyejin Choi and Yeonji Nam as the refugee ship's doors opened. "I can see blood on some of these people. We don't have time to waste." The medical team rushed forward as injured people began coming out of the ship. There was an Altarian woman carrying a small child who wasn't moving. A human man had burns all over his arms. An elderly alien was coughing up blood. The nurses worked fast, checking each person and deciding who needed help first. "Take the child to surgery room 2, Dr. Sujin Lee said as she examined the little Altarian boy. "His breathing is very weak, and get that burn victim to the treatment center immediately." The Florence Nightingale was huge inside. It had 20 different medical bays, each one equipped with the most advanced healing technology that Earth could build. Over 2,000 patients were already being treated on the ship. Some were coalition soldiers who had been hurt in battle. Others were Vorthak civilians who had been caught in bombing attacks. The human medical team didn't care which side anyone was from. If someone was hurt, they would help them. Nurse Hyejin Choi was working in the children's ward, where dozens of young refugees were recovering from their injuries. She sang soft songs to help them sleep and brought them special food that reminded them of home. Nurse Yeonji Nam was in charge of the surgical equipment, making sure everything was clean and ready for the next emergency operation. "Captain?" called Navigator Taehyun Jung from the front of the bridge. His voice sounded worried. "I'm seeing 3 ships coming toward us from the asteroid belt. They're moving fast, and they're not answering when we try to talk to them." Jihoon walked over to look at the display screen. 3 dark shapes were getting bigger as they approached. The computer identified them as Vorthak destroyers, warships built for fighting, not for rescue missions. Their weapon systems were turned on and ready to fire, but they hadn't aimed at the hospital ship yet. "Keep sending our medical codes on all frequencies," Jihoon told Mina Kim. "Make sure they know we're a hospital ship. We're here to help people, not to fight. They have to see our red cross markings." But something felt wrong. The Vorthak ships were getting closer, and they still weren't responding to any messages. Jihoon had a bad feeling in his stomach as he watched them approach. The attack came without any warning at all. One moment, Captain Jihoon Park was watching the 3 Vorthak ships approach, and the next moment, a bright green energy beam smashed into the front of his hospital ship. The blast was so powerful that it threw him across the bridge and slammed him into his command chair. The Florence Nightingale shook violently as its weak protective shield sparked and died. Hospital ships weren't built for fighting. They only had basic shields to protect against space debris, not military weapons. The ship's lights flickered as power systems began failing throughout the vessel. "We've been hit in Medical Bay too," Engineering Officer Dongmin Yoon yelled from his station. His hands were flying over the controls, trying to stop the damage reports that were flooding in. "The hull is cracking. We're losing air pressure on Deck 7. Ji-hoon couldn't believe what was happening. He pulled himself up from the floor, blood running down his face from where he had hit the chair. Through the main viewing window, he could see the 3 Vorthak destroyers spreading out around them like wolves surrounding their prey. "They're shooting at our medical areas on purpose," Lieutenant Mina Kim screamed from the communications station. Her voice was full of terror and disbelief. "They can see our red cross markings. They know we're a hospital ship." Another massive explosion rocked the ship as the second Vorthak destroyer fired its weapons. This time the blast hit the middle section, where most of the patients were being treated. Ji-hoon felt sick as he realized what was happening. The enemy wasn't just attacking them by mistake. They were deliberately targeting a hospital ship full of wounded people. Dr. Sujin Lee's voice came over the ship's intercom system, crackling with static from the damaged communications. "All medical staff begin emergency evacuation right now. Get the patients to the escape pods. I will not let these people die." Down in the medical bays, chaos had erupted. The lights were going out, emergency alarms were blaring, and smoke was filling the corridors. Nurse Hyejin Choi was in the children's ward when the first attack hit. She immediately started helping the young patients get to safety, carrying the smaller ones, and helping the older children walk toward the escape pods. "Don't be scared," she told a little Altarian girl who was crying. "We're going to get you somewhere safe." But as she was helping the last group of children evacuate, another energy blast tore through the ward. The explosion was so close that Hyejin never had a chance to run. She died instantly, still trying to protect the children she had been caring for. In the ship's pharmacy, medical technician Yoonji Nam was gathering emergency medical supplies to take to the escape pods. She had filled several bags with medicines and bandages when the third Vorthak ship fired directly at the pharmacy section. The room exploded in a ball of fire as all the medical chemicals ignited at once. Yoonji was completely destroyed in the blast. "Prepare all escape pods for launch," Captain Ji-hoon ordered, as another series of explosions shook the ship. The bridge was starting to fall apart around him. Pieces of the ceiling were crashing down, and sparks were flying from damaged control panels. The 3 Vorthak destroyers kept circling the dying hospital ship, firing again and again. They weren't trying to disable it or capture it. They were trying to kill everyone on board. The hospital ship's hull was breaking apart, and sections were spinning off into space. "Captain, the main power core is failing," Dongmin Yoon reported. "We have maybe 2 minutes before complete system failure." Ji-hoon knew this was the end. He activated the emergency communication beacon with shaking hands. This message had to get back to Earth. People had to know what happened here. "This is Captain Ji-hoon Park of the UES Florence Nightingale," he spoke into the recorder as explosions continued around him. "We are a medical vessel under attack by Vorthak military forces. They knew exactly what we were. They could see our hospital markings clearly. But they attacked us anyway. They murdered doctors, nurses, and patients. Earth must know. They killed healers and the people we were trying to save." Just as he finished speaking, a final massive explosion tore through the bridge. The transmission cut off as flames consumed everything around him. The Florence Nightingale, Earth's greatest hospital ship, was breaking apart in space, taking most of its crew and patients with it. The news reached Earth faster than anyone could have imagined. Captain Ji-hoon Park's final message traveled through space using quantum communication relays, arriving at Earth's government headquarters within just a few hours of the attack. What the message contained would change everything. Admiral Min-soo Han sat in the emergency meeting room of the Terran Council, watching the recorded transmission play on the large screen for the 3rd time. His hands were clenched into fists, and his face showed a kind of anger that his colleagues had never seen before. The video showed the Florence Nightingale breaking apart in space, while Captain Ji-hoon's voice spoke his final words about the deliberate murder of medical personnel. Around the table sat the most powerful leaders on Earth. These were people who usually spent weeks debating and discussing before making any important decisions. But today was different. Today, they all shared the same feeling of rage and disbelief. Council. Leader Jeon Kang was the first to speak. Her voice was steady, but everyone could hear the fury underneath her calm words. What we have witnessed here goes beyond anything we could have imagined. The Vorthak Empire has crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. They have broken every rule that civilized people follow during war. Defense Minister Sung Ho Lim looked pale as he stared at the casualty reports on his tablet. 3,700 people, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Doctors who dedicated their lives to healing others, nurses who stayed with their patients until the very end, and the patients themselves, men, women, and children from 6 different alien species, all of them murdered while seeking medical help. The room fell silent for a moment, as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what had happened. These weren't soldiers who had died in battle. These were healers and the people they were trying to save. The attack on the Florence Nightingale wasn't just an act of war. It was something much worse. "We need to vote," Jeon Kang announced. "All in favor of immediate military response?" Every single hand in the room went up. There was no discussion, no debate, no hesitation. The vote was completely unanimous, something that had never happened before in the history of the Terran Council. "Admiral Han," Jeon Kang said, turning to face the military leader, "you are now given complete command of Earth's entire military fleet. Your mission is simple but absolute. Destroy the Vorthak Empire's ability to make war. They wanted to see what happens when they push humanity too far. Show them." Admiral Min-Soo Han stood up slowly from his chair. He was a tall man with grey hair and scars on his hands from his years as a young soldier. He had always believed in using diplomacy first and violence only as a last resort. But the images of the destroyed hospital ship had changed something deep inside him. "The Vorthak think they know humanity," he said, his voice cold and determined. "They think we are weak because we choose to heal instead of hurt. They wanted to see what happens when humanity abandons mercy and chooses total war instead. They are about to find out exactly what that looks like." Within hours of the council meeting, secret activation codes were being transmitted to locations throughout the entire solar system. These codes had been prepared years ago, but never used. They were meant for the worst possible situation, and that situation had now arrived. Near Jupiter, what everyone thought were simple mining platforms suddenly began to change. Their outer shells opened up like flowers blooming, revealing massive weapon systems that had been hidden inside. Giant laser cannons and missile launchers emerged from structures that had been disguised as civilian mining equipment for decades. Around Saturn, the research stations that scientists used to study the planet's rings suddenly deployed fleets of warships. These weren't small patrol boats. They were massive battle cruisers and destroyers that had been built in secret and hidden for years. The ships powered up their engines and began forming into attack formations. Intelligence Director Yuna Bai appeared on Admiral Han's communication screen from the secret military command center. "Sir, all hidden assets are now online and ready for combat. Operation Nightingale has been authorized. We are ready to show the galaxy what Earth is truly capable of when we stop pretending to be peaceful." The Vorthak Empire had made the biggest mistake in their history. They were about to discover that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their kindness. It was their ability to become absolutely terrifying when someone hurt the innocent. The Vorthak patrol fleet was feeling confident as they approached the Proxima Centauri relay station. Their commander had received reports that some human ships were in the area, and he expected this to be an easy fight. After all, humans were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders and healers, not warriors. The Vorthak had always seen them as weak. But everything changed in the first 30 seconds of battle. What the Vorthak thought were harmless human merchant ships suddenly transformed before their eyes. The outer hulls split open like mechanical flowers, revealing massive weapon systems hidden underneath. Advanced laser cannons emerged from what had looked like cargo holds. Missile launchers unfolded from sections that were supposed to contain trade goods. Admiral Min-Soo Han stood on the bridge of his flagship, the mighty warship called Retribution. Through the large viewing windows, he watched as his tactical display showed the complete destruction of the enemy patrol fleet. It had taken less than 2 minutes. "Sir, the first engagement is complete," reported his tactical officer. "All Vorthak vessels destroyed, 0 human casualties." For years, human merchant ships had been traveling throughout Vorthak space, trading goods and establishing peaceful relationships. But these weren't really merchant vessels at all. They were the most advanced warships that Earth had ever built, disguised to look harmless. The Vorthak had welcomed them into their territory, never knowing they were actually military scouts gathering intelligence. Captain Woojin Seo's voice crackled over the communication system from his stealth ship, the Silent Thunder. His vessel was so advanced that it could become completely invisible to enemy sensors. For months he had been sneaking through Vorthak space, mapping every military base and weapons facility. "Admiral, we have completed our reconnaissance mission of the Vorthak home system," he reported. "Every single military installation has been identified and marked for destruction. We know the location of their shipyards, their weapons factories, their command centers, and their defense platforms." "Admiral." Han turned to his science officer, Dr. Jamin Oh, who was working at a console filled with complex displays and readouts. "Doctor, what's the status of our quantum targeting system?" Dr. Oh looked up from his instruments with satisfaction. "The system is fully online and calibrated, Admiral. We can now track and target every single Vorthak military asset simultaneously, no matter where they are in the galaxy. Our computers know the exact location of every warship, every weapons platform, every military base they have." This was technology that the Vorthak couldn't even imagine. While they were still using basic targeting computers, humanity had developed quantum systems that could process millions of targets at the same time and coordinate attacks across multiple star systems. Fleet Commander Sunmi Park was aboard her battle cruiser, the Thunderbolt, coordinating the assault on Vorthak military positions throughout their territory. Her ships moved like ghosts, appearing from hyperspace to destroy their targets and then vanishing again before the enemy could even respond. "Strike Team Alpha, you are clear to engage the weapons depot on Vorthak Prime," she commanded. "Strike. Team Beta, eliminate the shipyard at coordinate 774, remember. Precision strikes only." The human fleet moved with surgical precision. They didn't attack randomly or destroy everything in sight. Instead, they carefully targeted only military installations while leaving civilian areas completely untouched. This wasn't about conquest or revenge. It was about justice. Admiral Han opened a communication channel to all ships in his fleet. Hundreds of human commanders listened as he gave them their final orders. "Remember why we are here," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command and the pain of loss. "We are not conquerors seeking to build an empire. We are here to deliver justice for the murder of innocent healers and patients. Civilian populations are completely off limits, but every military installation, every weapons platform, every ship that carries the Vorthak war banner, obliterate them completely." The Vorthak Empire was about to learn a terrible lesson. They had thought humans were weak because they chose to heal rather than hurt. But they had made a fatal mistake. Humanity's kindness was not weakness. It was a choice. And when that choice was taken away by the murder of innocents, humans became the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The galaxy was about to witness the true power of Earth's military might, hidden for decades behind a mask of peaceful trade and medical missions. What should have been a long and bloody war lasted only 3 months. The mighty Vorthak Empire, which had been terrorizing smaller alien species for over 200 years, fell apart like a house of cards under humanity's carefully planned assault. Every day brought news of another Vorthak stronghold destroyed, another weapons facility reduced to rubble, another fleet of warships eliminated. The galaxy watched in complete amazement as the species they had considered weak and insignificant systematically dismantled the most feared military power in known space. Commander Kyung-Soo Kim stood on the bridge of his assault ship, looking down at the Vorthak stronghold on Kepler 186. This was one of their most important military bases, protected by massive energy shields and defended by thousands of soldiers. But before he attacked, he did something that shocked both his enemies and his allies. "Attention all civilian populations in the target area," he broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Commander Kim of the Earth Defense Force. You have 6 hours to evacuate to the safe zones we have established. We will provide transportation, food and medical care. We are here to destroy military targets only." Over the next few hours, human ships landed near the stronghold and began evacuating over 100,000 alien civilians who lived and worked in the area. These weren't just Vorthak people. There were representatives from dozens of different species who had been forced to work for the Vorthak military. Human soldiers helped elderly aliens climb aboard transport ships. Human medics treated injured civilians. Human engineers set up temporary shelters and provided food and water. The Vorthak military commanders couldn't believe what they were seeing. In their experience, war meant total destruction and the killing of everyone in the target area. But humans were actually stopping their own attack to save civilian lives, even the lives of their enemies. "All civilians have been evacuated to safety zones," reported Captain Nayeon Shin from her bomber squadron. Her ships were hovering in the atmosphere above the military base, ready to begin the attack. "We are clear to commence precision bombing." The attack that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of dropping massive bombs that would destroy everything for miles around, the human ships used incredibly precise weapons that could target individual buildings while leaving structures just a few meters away completely undamaged. "Precision bombing complete," Captain Shin reported 20 minutes later. "Military complex has been reduced to rubble. 0 civilian casualties confirmed. Repeat, 0 civilian casualties." The Vorthak stronghold that had taken decades to build was now nothing but smoking ruins. But the hospital next door was untouched. The school across the street still had all its windows intact. The alien families who lived nearby could return to their homes without any damage. Lieutenant Jae-hyun Woo led the ground assault team that landed to secure the area. What he found surprised him. Instead of fighting to the death, as expected, the surviving Vorthak soldiers were surrendering in large groups. "This is Lieutenant Woo reporting from the surface," he transmitted back to the fleet. "All remaining Vorthak military personnel have surrendered. Many of them are wounded and requesting medical assistance. I'm calling for medical teams to treat the injured." Within an hour, human doctors and nurses were treating wounded Vorthak soldiers, the same species that had murdered the medical staff aboard the Florence Nightingale just 3 months earlier. But the humans followed their own principles. They healed anyone who needed help, regardless of which side they had been fighting for. This same pattern repeated across 17 different star systems. Human forces would arrive, evacuate all, civilians destroy military targets with surgical precision, and then provide medical care to wounded enemy soldiers. The technological superiority that humanity displayed left every other species in the galaxy completely stunned. The Altarians, whose children had been patients aboard the Florence Nightingale, watched human broadcasts in amazement. "They have weapons that can destroy entire fleets," said their ambassador, "but they use them only against military targets. They have the power to wipe out entire planets, but instead they save civilian lives." Other alien species that had dismissed Earth, as unimportant, now scrambled to establish diplomatic relations. The Zenthari Republic, which had refused to even acknowledge human existence just months before, sent urgent messages requesting peace talks. The Corvan Alliance offered to become a protectorate under human leadership. But perhaps the most shocking thing for the galaxy to witness was what happened after each battle. Instead of enslaving the conquered populations or taking their resources, humans immediately began rebuilding. Human construction crews arrived to repair damaged infrastructure. Human doctors established hospitals. Human teachers opened schools. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was being defeated not just by superior weapons, but by an entirely different way of thinking about war and peace. Humanity had shown that true strength wasn't about how much destruction you could cause. It was about how much you could protect and heal. The hunt for the 3 destroyer captains who had murdered the crew of the Florence Nightingale took weeks of careful investigation. Human intelligence officers tracked them across multiple star systems, following every lead and analyzing every piece of evidence. Finally, They discovered that the three Vorthak commanders had retreated to a heavily fortified bunker on their homeworld, hoping to hide until the war was over. Marine Colonel Insu Park stood outside the bunker with his assault team, studying the massive concrete structure that the enemy commanders had built deep underground. This wasn't going to be an easy fight. The bunker had thick walls, multiple defensive systems, and dozens of loyal soldiers still protecting the war criminals inside. But Colonel Park wasn't going alone. Standing beside him were two very special people who had requested to be part of this mission. They were survivors from the Florence Nightingale who had been rescued from escape pods after the attack. Both of them had lost friends and colleagues when the hospital ship was destroyed. Dr. Youngmin Choi was one of those survivors. He had been working in Medical Bay 4 when the attack began, trying to save the life of a wounded Altarian child. The blast from the first enemy weapon had thrown him across the room and knocked him unconscious. When he woke up, he was in an escape pod floating in space, and his entire medical team was dead. "Are you sure you want to be here for this, Doctor?" Colonel Park asked him. "This is going to be a combat situation. It could be dangerous." Dr. Choi's face was set with determination. "Those three commanders murdered my friends," he said quietly. "They killed doctors and nurses who had dedicated their lives to healing others. They murdered patients who were lying helpless in their beds. I need to look them in the eye when they face justice." The assault on the bunker took 6 hours. Human. Marines used advanced breaching equipment to break through the defensive barriers, while specialized robots disarmed the automated weapon systems. The Vorthak soldiers inside fought desperately, but they were no match for Earth's elite military forces. When the bunker finally fell, the three destroyer captains were found cowering in the deepest section, surrounded by the bodies of their own soldiers who had died protecting them. They were dragged out in chains, their arrogant confidence completely gone. Dr. Youngmin Choi stood in the captured bunker, looking at the three Vorthak commanders who had ordered the attack on his hospital ship. These aliens had once seemed so powerful and terrifying. Now they looked small and pathetic as human soldiers held them prisoner. "You murdered healers," Dr. Choi said to them, his voice quiet but filled with pain. "You killed patients who were lying in their beds, unable to defend themselves. You destroyed people who had come to help others, not to fight a war." The three captains said nothing. They couldn't even look at the human doctor whose colleagues they had murdered. Admiral Min-Soo Han decided that the trial would be held aboard his flagship, the Retribution. He wanted the entire galaxy to witness this moment of justice. The main assembly hall of the massive warship was converted into a courtroom with representatives from dozens of alien species attending as observers. The evidence against the three Vorthak commanders was overwhelming. Human investigators had recovered the attack footage from the Florence Nightingale's emergency recorders, showing exactly how the hospital ship had been deliberately targeted. They had intercepted communications between the destroyer captains, proving that they knew they were attacking a medical vessel. Most importantly, they had testimony from the survivors who had witnessed the attack firsthand. Admiral Han sat at the judges' table, wearing his formal dress uniform. Behind him hung the flags of Earth and the United Nations, symbols of humanity's commitment to justice and law. The three Vorthak captains stood in chains before him, no longer the proud warriors they had once pretended to be. "You stand accused of war crimes against humanity and all sentient life," Admiral Han announced, his voice carrying throughout the courtroom and to broadcast receivers across the galaxy. "The evidence shows that you deliberately attacked a clearly marked hospital ship, murdered medical personnel, and killed patients who were under medical care." The trial lasted 3 days. Witness after witness testified about the attack and its aftermath. Video evidence was presented, showing the Florence Nightingale's Red Cross markings and medical neutrality broadcasts. The three captains' own communications were played, proving their guilt beyond any doubt. By the laws of warfare recognized by all civilized species in this galaxy, Admiral Han finally announced, "You are found guilty of crimes against humanity and sentient life. The sentence is death." The execution was broadcast live across known space as a warning to anyone who might consider targeting medical personnel in the future. The message was clear: Those who murder healers will face the full wrath of human justice. While the Vorthak military was being destroyed across the galaxy, something unexpected began happening on the conquered worlds. Instead of enslaving the defeated population or taking revenge on innocent civilians, humanity began showing their true character in a way that shocked every observer. Captain Minji Yu landed on the former Vorthak colony world of Kepler 438b just 3 days after the military occupation was complete. What she found there broke her heart. Thousands of Vorthak families were living in the ruins of bombed buildings, afraid and hungry. Many of them were elderly people and children who had nothing to do with the war. Instead of ignoring their suffering, Captain Yu immediately ordered her ships to begin an emergency humanitarian mission. Within hours, human engineers were setting up temporary shelters. Human doctors were treating the injured, and human supply officers were distributing food and clean water to everyone who needed it. "Listen to me carefully," Captain Yu announced to the gathered Vorthak civilians through a translator device. "We came to this system to destroy the military forces that murdered innocent people aboard our hospital ship, but we will not punish innocent civilians for the crimes that their leaders committed. You are under our protection now." The Vorthak people couldn't believe what they were hearing. In their experience, conquest meant slavery, torture, and death for the defeated population. But these humans were actually helping them survive and rebuild their lives. Dr. Heejin Lim arrived on the planet a week later with a full medical team. She had volunteered for this assignment specifically because she wanted to honor the memory of the Florence Nightingale's crew. What she found when she set up her field hospital amazed her. "Doctor, we have a problem," said her assistant, Nurse Jaemin Ko. "Some of the wounded soldiers we're treating are former Vorthak military personnel. They're the same people who were fighting against us just days ago." Dr. Lim looked at the wounded Vorthak soldier lying on the medical table. His leg had been badly injured in the final battle, and he was in severe pain. She could see the fear in his eyes as he looked at her, probably expecting her to let him die or torture him for information. Instead, she began treating his wounds with the same care she would give to any human patient. "The Florence Nightingale was destroyed by your military," she said to the wounded soldier as she worked. "My friends and colleagues died on that ship, but the mission of that ship continues through us. We heal people, regardless of what species they are or which side they fought on." The wounded Vorthak soldier began crying, not from pain but from disbelief. He had been told that humans were monsters who would show no mercy to their enemies, but here was a human doctor saving his life, even though his own people had murdered her friends. Word of humanity's unexpected mercy spread quickly through the former Vorthak territories. Other alien species who had been watching the war began sending their own representatives to witness what was happening. What they saw changed their understanding of what humans truly were. On world after world, the same pattern repeated itself. Human construction crews worked alongside former Vorthak engineers to rebuild destroyed infrastructure. Human teachers established schools where alien children could learn. Human doctors worked with former enemy medical personnel to treat anyone who needed care. The Zenthari ambassador, who had come to observe the human occupation, sent a shocked report back to his government. "The humans are not behaving like conquerors. They are behaving like caretakers. They are spending their own resources to help the people they defeated. This is completely unprecedented in galactic history." But the most surprising development came when humanity announced their long-term plans for the former Vorthak territories. Instead of annexing the conquered worlds and making them part of the Earth Empire, they did something that no other species had ever done before. "These worlds will be reorganized into autonomous regions," announced the human colonial administrator. "This means that the local populations will govern themselves, make their own laws, and control their own resources. We will provide protection and assistance, but we will not rule over you." The galaxy watched in amazement as human engineers began rebuilding entire cities that had been damaged in the war. They used the most advanced construction technology available, creating infrastructure that was actually better than what had existed before the conflict began. Former Vorthak citizens found themselves living in cleaner, more efficient cities, with better hospitals, schools, and transportation systems than they had ever experienced under their own government. And all of this was being provided by the same species that had just defeated them in war. The message was clear. Humanity's strength came not from their ability to destroy, but from their commitment to build and heal. Even in the midst of total victory, they chose compassion over cruelty, mercy over revenge. The massive Galactic Council chamber had never been so crowded. Representatives from over 300 different alien species filled the circular assembly hall, all of them trying to understand what had just happened in their galaxy. The Vorthak Empire, which had dominated galactic politics for centuries, no longer existed. In its place stood humanity, a species that most council members had barely heard of just 6 months ago. Ambassador Suyong Kwon walked slowly to the center speaking platform, her footsteps echoing in the enormous chamber. She was a small woman compared to many of the alien delegates around her, but everyone in the room could feel the quiet authority that surrounded her. Behind her walked 2 guards, but they were clearly ceremonial. Everyone knew that Earth's real power wasn't in this room, but in the massive fleet of warships that now patrolled former Vorthak space. Honored delegates, Ambassador Kwon began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the chamber through the translation devices. 6 months. Cargo humanity was known throughout this galaxy as traders and healers. We preferred diplomacy to warfare, medicine to military action. We wanted nothing more than to help others and to learn from the diverse species that make up our galactic community. She paused, letting her words sink in. Many of the alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, remembering how they had dismissed human requests for meaningful diplomatic relations. We did not seek the power that we now possess, she continued. It was forced upon us when the Vorthak Empire chose to commit the most heinous war crime imaginable, the deliberate murder of medical personnel and patients aboard a clearly marked hospital ship. When they destroyed the Florence Nightingale, they crossed a line that we could not allow to stand. The Altarian delegate, whose species had lost children aboard the hospital ship, stood up in his section. The human response was swift and terrible, he said, his voice filled with emotion, but also merciful beyond anything we could have expected. They destroyed our enemies, but protected our civilians. They conquered our oppressors, but freed us from tyranny. Ambassador Kwon nodded respectfully to the Altarian representative. What happened to the Florence Nightingale must never happen again. Therefore, we propose that this council formally adopt what we call the Florence Protocol. The chamber fell silent as she explained the new law that humanity wanted the galaxy to accept. Any attack on medical vessels, regardless of which species operated them, would be considered an act of total war against humanity and would result in the complete destruction of the attacking force's military capability. The vote was unanimous. Every single species in the galaxy agreed to the Florence Protocol, not because they were forced to, but because they had seen what happened to those who violated the basic rules of civilized warfare. In the weeks that followed, something unprecedented began happening throughout the galaxy. Species that had ignored Earth's diplomatic missions for decades suddenly began requesting meetings with human ambassadors. The Zenthari Republic, which had refused to even acknowledge human existence, sent urgent messages asking for trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. The Corvan Alliance went even further, formally requesting to become a protectorate under human leadership. Their ambassador explained their reasoning. We have watched humanity's conduct during this war. They possess the power to conquer the entire galaxy, but instead they choose to protect and heal. We would rather live under human protection than face the chaos that will come as other species try to fill the power vacuum left by the Vorthak. Perhaps the most moving gesture came from the Altarian people themselves. On their homeworld, they erected a massive monument made of crystallized light that could be seen from orbit. The monument bore the names of every person who had died aboard the Florence Nightingale, human and alien alike. At the base of the monument, they inscribed a simple message: "To humanity, who avenged our children, and then showed mercy to our enemies." Admiral Minsu Han stood aboard his flagship, looking out at the fleet of human warships that now patrolled the galaxy's major trade routes. His officers had gathered for their regular briefing, but today's meeting was different. Today, They were discussing their new role in galactic affairs. "The war is over," he told his assembled fleet commanders. "The Vorthak military has been completely destroyed, and their territories are being rebuilt under human supervision. But our mission is just beginning." He gestured toward a star map, showing the current positions of human forces throughout the galaxy. "We are the guardians now, whether we wanted this responsibility or not. But remember, we are not conquerors seeking to build an empire. We are protectors ensuring that what happened to the Florence Nightingale never happens again." The galaxy had a new order, one built not on fear and oppression like the Vorthak Empire, but on protection and healing. Humanity had become the dominant power in known space, but they wielded that power with wisdom and restraint that amazed every other species. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy knew true peace. 5 years had passed since the attack on the Florence Nightingale, and Earth had built something that could be seen from millions of kilometers away. Orbiting the planet in a slow, graceful circle was a massive structure that took everyone's breath away. A perfect replica of the destroyed hospital ship, but this one was built to last forever. Director Yejin Ko stood on the observation deck of the memorial station, watching through the large windows as construction crews put the finishing touches on the monument. The replica ship was enormous, stretching over 2 kilometers from bow to stern, and it was made from the most beautiful materials that human technology could create. The hull was constructed from quantum crystal that sparkled like diamonds in the light of Earth's sun. But mixed into that crystal were pieces of the original Florence Nightingale, hull plating, metal fragments, and pieces of equipment that had been recovered from the wreckage. This wasn't just a copy of the destroyed ship. It was built from the actual remains of the vessel where so many heroes had died. "Director Ko, we're ready to begin the final inscription ceremony," announced her assistant, pointing to the massive display screens that covered the monument's surface. Yejin nodded and activated the memorial system. Slowly, one by one, names began appearing in glowing letters across the ship's hull. These were the names of every single person who had died when the Vorthak attacked the hospital ship. 3,247 souls from dozens of different species who had been seeking or providing medical care. The names weren't just simple text. Each one was inscribed in light that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. And when visitors focused on any particular name, they could hear a brief recording about that person's life and what they had been doing when they died. Dr. Sujin Lee's name glowed near the medical bay section, surrounded by the names of all the nurses and doctors who had died trying to save their patients. Captain Jihoon Park's name was displayed prominently on the bridge section of the memorial ship, and beneath, it played his final transmission on a continuous loop. Visitors from across the galaxy could hear his last words. "They knew what we were. They saw our markings. They killed us anyway. Earth must know. They murdered doctors and patients alike. Let them remember," Yejin whispered as she watched. "The names appear that humanity's mercy has limits." The memorial wasn't just beautiful, it was also a warning. At the base of the monument, visible to every ship that approached Earth, was a simple but powerful message carved into metal that would last for thousands of years. They attacked healers. They murdered the innocent. They learned that humanity's capacity for mercy is matched only by our capacity for justice. Never again. Every day, diplomatic vessels from across the galaxy came to visit the monument. Alien ambassadors would bring their crews to walk through the memorial halls and read about the people who had died. Many visitors left flowers, crystals, or other tokens of respect from their home worlds. The Altarian ambassador came every month, always bringing a group of young Altarians whose older siblings had been patients aboard the original Florence Nightingale. "We want our children to understand," he explained to Director Ko during one visit, "that there are people in this galaxy who will fight to protect healers and innocent life." But the most special visitor to the memorial was the new Florence, a rebuilt medical ship that carried on the mission of the original. Dr. Sujin Lee had survived the attack and now commanded this new vessel, which was even more advanced than the one that had been destroyed. "Docking sequence initiated," announced Chief Nurse Bomin Kwak as the new Florence approached the memorial station. "All medical staff prepare for crew rotation. The New Florence made regular stops at the memorial to change crew members and resupply. Dr. Sujin Lee always took time to visit the monument and pay her respects to the colleagues she had lost. But there was one important difference between the original Florence Nightingale and its replacement. The New Florence never traveled alone. Accompanying it were sleek escort ships from Earth's most advanced fleet, warships that were invisible to most sensors but deadly beyond imagination. These guardian vessels ensured that no one would ever again attack a human medical ship. Remember, Dr. Lee told her new crew members as they looked at the memorial, "We carry on the mission of healing that was started by those who died here. But we also carry the protection of Earth's fleet, which has shown the galaxy what happens to those who target the innocent." As the New Florence undocked and began its journey to help people in distant star systems, it passed close to the memorial ship. For a moment, the two vessels, one real and one memorial, seemed to salute each other in the darkness of space. The message was clear to everyone who witnessed this scene. Humanity would continue to heal and help others throughout the galaxy, but they would do so under the protection of the most powerful military force in known space, a force that had proven beyond any doubt that those who murder healers and innocent people face complete and total annihilation. The galaxy would never forget the lesson of the Florence Nightingale.